Moscow needs to be mercilessly bombed, just like these damn dogs are bombing Kiev. Bastards. Scum. The way they bomb Kiev, that's how Moscow should be bombed too. Moscow must feel the war for itself. It shouldn't be like this, that the war is somewhere out there. Here we live in Moscow just as we always have. Nothing has changed for us. The supermarkets are full, so yes, food has gotten more expensive, but there is still food. The theaters are open. It shouldn't be like this. Everyone in Moscow should feel the war. They need to really feel it themselves, in their own skin, so to speak.
For Muscovites, it's a shock that Moscow's air defense is blowing up residential buildings, that Moscow's air defense is hitting Moscow's skyscrapers. Oh my God, cars are on fire. Something really got wrecked here. Lightning, friends. September 24th, and once again a massive attack on Russia. Moscow and St. Petersburg are in chaos. There's no gasoline, a terrifying fuel crisis.
So I specifically drove around to test and A10 gas stations. There's absolutely no gasoline in the city. Only diesel is available.
In occupied Crimea, there are explosions right now near the Belbek and Kacha airfields. In Taganrog, there have been 7 strikes at the airport. Right now, the port of Novorossiysk is under attack. Drones have come in both from the air and from the sea. Everyone there is in a panic, and also the colorlessness of the lions in Koshina strikes in Taganrog, Belgorod, and Valuyki. In short, we're attacking everything we can. Oil refineries are burning in Bashkortostan. Glory to the armed forces of Ukraine. Meanwhile, Trump in New York is just washing his hands of it. He's distancing himself from questions about the Russian-Ukrainian war. He doesn't plan to impose sanctions nor to spoil relations with Russia. He's put everything on NATO's shoulders. We'll discuss all this with the one and only renowned journalist Dmytro Gordon. Dmytro Ilyich, welcome.
Hello, Dasha. Hello to our wonderful, esteemed viewing audience.
Dmytro Ilyich, well, it's September 24th. I'm in a good mood, as you always say, because, well, it's like we're at some kind of oil pumping station right now. The Novorossiysk port oil refinery is under attack. The Belbek and Kacha airfields in Crimea. No gasoline in Moscow, the Leningrad region. What do you say?
We are helping the Russian economy overcome, of course, temporary difficulties. The Russian economy, as the highly respected President Trump rightly noted, is in a terrible state, with a tendency for the situation to rapidly deteriorate. This deserves applause. Ukraine has had a hand in this. Ukraine has played a very direct role. And I repeat, the trend is toward a rapid worsening of the situation. Now, they're going to raise the VAT by another 2%, another 2, plus 2. That's not the limit. They have to get money from somewhere. They have no money. No one is going to lend them money. China isn't crazy either. Why would you lend money to losers? With losers, you should be taking things away, not giving them. So they'll just start taking things away little by little. And the war is draining everything out of them. It's good for Ukraine. How so? It's bad for Ukraine, but it's good in the sense that our partners are backing us up with money. They're supporting us so we don't have problems with budget funding. Knock on wood, right? We don't have any obvious problems with weapons or with money for weapons production. That's because Europe is helping us. The Russians have these problems because no one wants to help them with money. Weapons, sure, but you have to pay for them. In a situation where sanctions affect literally everything, including oil, including gas, which are the main sources, as well as diamonds and so on, all the main components that fill the budget, the problem is obvious. And when there are also attacks on oil refineries, when in a number of regions there's no gasoline or it's being sold at inflated prices. Yesterday, I saw a video, if I'm not mistaken, in Russia, gasoline costs twice as much as in Kazakhstan. That's just not a normal situation. It's just a complete mess. And to top it all off, so yes, now it's interesting to see what will happen in Novorossiysk. I think we've sent both our naval and aerial drones their way, just so they don't start thinking life is paradise, so that they lose the remnants of their underdeveloped fleet there.
By the way, have you noticed how intensely we're attacking Crimea now? Look, the Belbek airfield, Kacha are under attack, Novorossiysk. Then we're hitting, obviously, the ports near St. Petersburg, Novatek, Kusteluga, Primorsk. That's real power, real power. They even unveiled new Toloka drones, which will attack the Black Sea. As I understand it, these Toloka drones are most likely in action in Novorossiysk.
Everything is in action there. Everything at hand is being used. Of course, of course. The ground and water will burn under their feet, and already are, because you can't behave like animals. There is punishment for such behavior. And now that punishment is already in effect. Karma is at work. Karma is becoming the norm.
So we used to sing songs about Marichka. Now we urgently need to come up with a song about Toloka so that it becomes really popular. I don't know, maybe there are already songs, but I would really like for us to come up with our own song about Toloka. Dimitro, what do you think?
But it will be born without a doubt. We have many talented people in our country who will create songs about Toloka and everything else. And by the way, songs have been appearing since the very first days of the war. We've seen and heard songs by Alexander Ponomaryov, amazing ones, and by Natalia Mogilevska. I believe these are the best songs of the war, which these two people have already created. And they will create even more. Without a doubt, our people are talented. There are plenty of people to write songs and to perform them.
Dmitry Dmitrievich, you always say that Moscow should be the main target of our strike because Muscovites need to stop eating foie gras, or, as you say, Gilardo oysters with lavender rough coffee. Like Olesia always says to me, lavender rough coffee, and instead they should be trembling with fear. For the past 2 days, we've been attacking Moscow, Sheremetyevo, Vnukovo, all were paralyzed. Russians waited 17 hours in airplanes, unable to fly either to Dubai or from Dubai. It was a complete collapse there. The railway hubs are also under attack. Now look, there's no gasoline in Moscow, but the heat has started, excuse me, but that's actually a good thing.
I always remember the band Genghis Khan from my youth. The Olympics were held in Moscow in 1980. They sang, "Moscow, Moscow, we'll bomb you, you'll have your Olympics." It's as if they were singing about our times.
Dmitry, well, isn't it good? You talk about Moscow, Moscow. So the fact that there's no gasoline in Moscow, that they can't fly, that they're spending 17 hours on planes, do you think does this hurt them? Do they actually feel all of this?
Not completely yet. They still need to really feel it. This realization needs to come to everyone, not just to ordinary people, to regular workers, not just to the regulars at cozy restaurants on Patriarch Ponds in Moscow, but also fully to the Putin elite. That is, they need to understand that the choice between money, fantastic amounts of money, that they get from military contracts, from military production, and they are shamelessly profiting from the war, the Putin elite. He gave them this opportunity so they wouldn't touch him. He cut them in on the deal. So, the crucial choice between this significant money and the very real threat to their own continued existence should ultimately lead them to make the absolutely right decision. I'm truly thinking now that the glass is already completely overflowing. The water is most certainly already spilling over the very brim of the glass for the entire Putin elite, because there are indeed two incredibly interesting and significant precedents at play here, right now. The first is an interview with the Russian fascist scoundrel Rogozin, one of the people closest to Putin, which he gave literally just yesterday or the day before, where, calling the war a war and not a special military operation, he says that the war has reached a dead end. In other words, yes, I actually think this is a landmark interview because one of the scoundrels closest to Putin is calling things by their proper names. What is he saying? He says that the war has reached a dead end, that it is impossible for the Russians to advance into Ukrainian territory that is not occupied, and for us to advance into territory occupied by the Russians. He says that, for example, on the Zaporizhzhia front, it's a scorched steppe. If a hare appears 20 kilometers away, we see it and kill the hare. If one of our tanks appears, they take out our tank, they take out our troops. So all these assaults are pointless. We can't capture anything. This is a very important interview with Rogozin, especially considering that it's Rogozin. Strictly speaking, he should already be facing jail time for such an interview. But of course, no one will actually jail him because Rogozin, an extremely experienced Putin-era official, couldn't possibly come out with an interview like this unless he had backing from some major security officials, which means he's representing the viewpoint of powerful figures in the security apparatus. Since he came out with this interview, and since he's saying that the war no longer makes sense and is at a dead end, it means he's expressing the viewpoint of security officials who are especially close to Putin. And against this backdrop, Dasha, I want to draw your attention and the attention of our esteemed audience, our viewers, to the fact that another person, even closer to Putin than Rogozin, Dmitry Kozak, has submitted his resignation, and it was accepted. In other words, Kozak has resigned. I want to remind you who Dmitry Kozak is. He is an ethnic Ukrainian born in Ukraine in the Hyveron district of the Kirovohrad region. Then he joined the army, served in the airborne troops, the air assault forces, and was recruited there by the GRU of the Soviet Union, the main intelligence directorate. After that, he ended up in Leningrad among Sobchak's associates together with Putin. There, he became friends with him, and for almost 30 years now, he has been going hand in hand with Putin, so to speak. Dmitry Kozak has always dealt with Ukraine, focusing on the Ukrainian direction. He has dealt with Abkhazia, Moldova, Chechnya. There's hardly anything he hasn't been involved with, but Ukraine in particular. He knows Ukraine well, knows the Ukrainian elite from different years, and he was against a full-scale war. And as Western intelligence agencies know, he came to Putin before that epic meeting of the Security Council, where the annexation of the so-called DNR and LNR was being discussed, a day before the full-scale invasion. That very meeting where Narishkin famously stammered. So before that, Kozak came to Putin and said that he did not agree with the idea of a full-scale invasion and explained why. Putin said, "You can keep that opinion to yourself. I've made my decision." Kozak said, "I will vote publicly as the first, as a leader, like you, but I will keep my opinion to myself." That's what I think. So, all these years during the full-scale invasion, Kozak remained the deputy head of Putin's presidential administration in Russia. At the same time, of course, he maintained his own point of view, and now he has resigned. And now, according to Western intelligence agencies,
Right.
Kozak is preparing to give an interview to justify his position. So here's what needs to be said. First, in this interview, he wants to confirm his loyalty to Putin. And in this interview, he wants to reaffirm his disagreement with the full-scale invasion and his view that it needs to be brought to an end. This so-called special military operation needs to be wrapped up already. And so, as for the journalists he will be speaking with, or maybe while we're talking he's already spoken with them, he did not consider so-called enemies of Russia like me. Of course, I wouldn't do an interview with him anyway. He didn't consider Western journalists in general, but he did consider Western journalists from the Kremlin pool. That's why I wouldn't be surprised if in the coming days we see an in-depth interview with Dmitry Kozak, which will correlate with and essentially be a continuation of Dmitry Rogozin's interview. This clearly tells us that among Vladimir Putin's closest and most trusted security officials, there is a deeply persistent and widely held belief that this ongoing war absolutely needs to be brought to a definitive end, and very soon. The war is at a dead end. Further ground advances are no longer possible. And it needs to end before the Russian economy goes into a steep dive.
Dmitry Ilyich, there's one more very important point to add to this. I'd like you to pay attention to this. This is probably the third time it has happened. During a massive drone attack on Moscow, Moscow's air defense struck residential buildings, skyscrapers where Muscovites live, and they showed these apartments. And in those apartments, there were these missiles, part of the missile defense system that was shooting down the drones. And now they're already talking about it, that Moscow's air defense systems are targeting them. How do you assess this overall?
How can you not recall Willy Tokarev and his famous song, "Skyscrapers, skyscrapers, and I'm so small"? Yes, I see this as a positive thing. Let me repeat this once again, very clearly. There are indeed plenty of genuinely good people in Moscow who deeply sympathize with the plight of Ukraine, who absolutely hate Putin and the oppressive Russian fascism. They fully understand that this war is, well, simply vile, criminal, disgusting, and they're just afraid to go out into the streets because they would actually get real prison sentences. So I am well aware that there are quite a few such people in Moscow. At the same time, I say that Moscow should be mercilessly bombed, just as these damn dogs are bombing Kyiv. Sorry, I called them dogs. No, dogs are better than they are. They are simply scum bastards. Just as they are bombing Kyiv, Moscow should be bombed the same way. Moscow must feel the war itself. It shouldn't be like this, that the war is somewhere out there. Here we live in Moscow, as we always have. Nothing has changed for us. Supermarkets are full, so there are groceries. Yes, they've gotten more expensive, but food is available. Theaters are open. Yes, they've gone through the repertoire. Now this is forbidden, that's forbidden, and that too is forbidden, but this patriotic crap is allowed. But theaters are open and the cinema is running. So peaceful life is in full swing. At Petersburg's ponds, I repeat, they serve oysters in the restaurants. Yes, they're more expensive, but they're available. Sanctions don't mean anything to us. It shouldn't be this way. Everyone in Moscow should feel the war. They should truly experience it themselves, in their very own skin, so to speak. And this kind of widespread collective indignation should ultimately lead to the complete and utter end of the war, once and for all. That's what I think.
For Muscovites, it's a shock that Moscow's air defense is blowing up residential buildings, that Moscow's air defense is hitting Moscow skyscrapers. Dmitry Ilyich, Trump made a statement that NATO should fully provide Ukraine with offensive weapons, first and foremost. And then there was a statement that America is also ready to provide Ukraine with offensive weapons. Here's my question. So does this mean Trump is ready to give us missiles that will definitely strike Moscow and St. Petersburg after the General Assembly in New York?
I don't know what Trump is ready to give us.
Yes.
Whether he's ready to give us anything at all. He's ready to give them to European partners, to NATO, so that they can transfer them to Ukraine. But I firmly know, and I'm convinced of this, that Trump wants to help Ukraine. If Trump didn't want to help us, he would have washed his hands of this long ago and wouldn't be dealing with this issue. He has a huge number of domestic problems and issues in America, in the United States, that he needs to address. And time is not unlimited. It's not endless. He has 24 hours in a day, out of which he also needs to rest. Let me remind you, he's 79 years old. Yet he persistently deals with the Ukrainian issue, and he does it for one reason. He genuinely wants to help Ukraine. I'm sure of it. There aren't even any other options. So, what does he want to do next? We don't know. He knows, or maybe even he doesn't know yet. But it's impossible to deny his initial desire to help Ukraine is there.
Dmitry Ilyich, when Trump made his statement at the UN General Assembly yesterday that Ukraine will receive all the necessary weapons, including offensive ones, does he mean only the European partners? So now he's basically handing us over completely, leaving us entirely to our European partners and quietly washing his hands of the situation, because yesterday all the reputable media reported that most likely Trump is stepping back, admitting that he can't do anything about this issue and will instead resume diplomatic relations with Russia.
That's out of the question. Resuming diplomatic relations with Russia is simply impossible. Let's keep it simple. Where is Ukraine located? In Europe.
Of course.
Is Ukraine's security important to Europeans? Well, it's absolutely crucial. Because any competent politician, and even an incompetent one, understands that if, God forbid, Putin, knock on wood, captures Ukraine, he'll keep going. And his recent maneuvers and provocations towards Western countries, towards NATO countries, confirm what I'm saying. So if he steamrolls Ukraine, intoxicated by his success, he'll move further into Europe, into NATO countries. That's why Trump logically asks Europeans, are you even planning to think about your own security? Or do you unfairly expect that only I should handle this while you keep drinking your morning coffee in your cafes on your cobblestone streets? Well, do you realize that Russia threatens you? Do you understand that it's time to stop such reckless migration policies when soon there will be utter chaos on your streets? How much longer are you going to indulge in this leftist nonsense? This is outright disgraceful, says Trump. Then he speaks through his actions. He says, guys, you have money. You're not poor. You're not pretending to be poor. Your industry is developed. Everything is fine with you. That's why you need to spend money on defense. Otherwise, you and your industry and your money won't be around. That's why it's time to spend money on defense and on helping Ukraine in its fight against Russia. Of course, you don't have the kind of powerful weapons that I have. I'm ready to sell them to you for Ukraine. Submit your requests. Tell me what you need, and I'll sell you those weapons, thus ensuring stability for Ukraine, security for Europe, and money for American taxpayers who have entrusted me to become president of this great country for a second time. I'll create jobs for Americans. Americans will earn money, and you take care of security. I'm supporting you in this by providing my excellent weapons. What's wrong with this line of reasoning? I think everything is just fine.
Mitrik, everyone here is divided over Trump's statement. The first group of media is focused on the fact that Trump supposedly gave a huge number of compliments to Zelensky. He called Ukraine and referred to Russia as a paper tiger. After that, Peskov responded with fierce statements, saying, first of all, that there are no such things as paper tigers that were bears and so on, but they should sort it out themselves. Then he said that Ukraine has a great spirit while Russians are standing in lines for gasoline. He wrote, as the President of the United States, that Moscow or the Leningrad region, that St. Petersburg is already out of gasoline. He went on to say that they will supply Ukraine with weapons in any quantity and that Ukraine will reclaim all its territories. And possibly it will go even further since the Russian economy is practically destroyed. Soon Russians will realize that there is no gasoline and all the money is going to the war. These are Trump's quotes. Dimitri, let's try to figure this out. I'd like to start with the quote. Ukraine will reclaim all its territories and possibly go even further. After all, the Russian economy is destroyed.
Yes, wonderful words. What is Trump talking about? Trump is saying that given the state of the Russian economy and the assistance Americans are providing to Ukraine with their weapons funded by European money, he believes the time is near when Russia, due to its financial and economic weakness, will no longer be able to hold on to the territories it has seized. Listen, it takes a lot of money to maintain control over occupied territories. Yes, what if they already don't have gasoline in a number of regions? If all the money has gone to the war, if they're raising taxes, which, by the way, is provoking discontent, not only among their elites, but also among ordinary people. Well, let's put it this way. Well, they did capture Deyevka, a pile of sand, gravel, and shattered concrete slabs. Well, they took Deyevka, so let's say they took Bakhmut, for example. But what are they going to do with it? Tell me, what are they going to do with it? After all, that requires money. And Crimea, what is it profitable? Crimea is unprofitable and always has been. And where are they supposed to get the money for it? From the Russian budget. And if the budget is bursting at the seams, they need to hold on to the captured territories. But they can't even hold on to their own territories. They have devastation. They have public utilities that haven't been repaired for decades. Pipes are rotten, not repaired since Soviet times. Elevators haven't been replaced, barracks haven't been resettled all across Russia. There are a huge number of Khrushchevkas, and before that, they built barracks. Terrible, horrifying, unlivable places, yet millions of people across Russia still live in them. And Siberia, the Urals, vast territories where only 14 million Russians live, along with the Far East, and there are already a lot of Chinese there too. How do they hold on to these territories? And what can we even say about the occupied, half-destroyed territories? That's why Trump means that if their economy collapses, and that's where things are heading, they won't have the money to hold on to the seized territories. Trump believes that these territories will naturally return to Ukraine, which will be strong.
Dmitrievich, when we talk about the return of territory, President Zelensky, during an interview he gave on the sidelines to journalists, said that he was surprised by these comments. And the main question is, will the United States of America and our Western partners provide us with all the necessary weapons, including F-16s, and not just in sufficient quantities, so that, as Trump stated, we can liberate all our territories?
I believe that we will liberate the territories not by military means.
I see.
That's what I think. I could be wrong. I believe that we will liberate our territories through the economy by economic means, because Russia's economy is collapsing, and I repeat, they won't have the money to hold on to these territories. Listen, in the prosperous city of Donetsk, which was thriving before the war, before 2014, I don't need anyone to tell me about Donetsk. I used to go there often, and I saw everything with my own eyes. It was an ultra-modern European city. In this ultra-modern European city, which had amazing airports, like the Prokofiev Airport, now destroyed, which had the incredible Donbass Arena Stadium, probably unmatched anywhere else in Europe, which had 5-star hotels, such wide avenues, beautiful streets, roads. Just think about the life that used to be in Donetsk. In that very Donetsk, 11 years after the arrival of the Russian world, people are drinking water from puddles because there is no water. So what is the price of this Russian occupation life if they can't improve people's lives, but only make them worse? But if there is no water, if people have been reduced to a miserable state, and mostly only elderly people remain there, since everyone who could leave has already left, so these elderly people are drinking water from puddles in the 21st century in a city like that. This is a verdict, a diagnosis for this damned Russian world. They can't hold on to it. It's beyond their ability. They managed to conquer, but they can't hold it. That's the point.
Medish, well, when Trump also, just like us, discussed that because of our constant attacks on oil refineries and railway hubs transporting fuel in Russia, there is a massive fuel crisis, and there's no gasoline even in Moscow. There's a shortage of gasoline at gas stations in the capital. In Moscow, people are surprised and in shock, although Donald Trump says this is a deserved or natural reaction to everything that's happening. It will be very hard in Moscow. Its economy will collapse, writes Donald Trump on his social media.
That's right. Because again, all the money is being eaten up by the war. Putin miscalculated. Putin is an idiot. Just an idiot, he miscalculated. By embarking on this adventure, he thought he would conquer all of Ukraine in 3 days or 3 months. But when he failed to conquer it, when it became clear that it wouldn't work, Trump gave him an opportunity to bow out gracefully. If Trump didn't exist, he would have had to be invented for Putin. He told him, listen, just keep the territories you've already seized. Let's separate along the line of demarcation and part ways gracefully. And tell your drugged up people that you won, and everyone will believe you, the propagandists will spin it, and everything will be fine. And after that, Putin started to dig in his heels. Just some kind of idiot. Honestly, just an idiot. I have no other words for him.
Dmitrievich, the latest breaking news is that the authorities of Krasnodar Krai claim that the freebies have attacked the center of Novorossiysk. It is further reported that this operation, including attacks by unmanned vessels, is targeting the Russian Federation's Black Sea Fleet and Sevastopol right now, and they're out of fuel. Since last night, there's been no gasoline in the city, only diesel fuel. It's the same situation in Moscow. Muscovites are standing in lines, and it's completely forbidden to sell fuel in canisters. Everyone is writing about this now, saying it's some kind of terrible collapse. In Moscow, Lukoil, among other gas stations, has banned the sale of gasoline in canisters. And business representatives in the Moscow or Leningrad region have also reported restrictions at gas stations. Look.
About Novorossiysk, it's clear that what's there are not remnants, but the remains of the Black Sea Fleet. The main thing is not to confuse the two. It's clear that Ukraine will destroy everything connected to the Black Sea Fleet. But that's also obvious. In other words, the Black Sea is a closed puddle. Nothing can enter there anymore. Without Turkey. Turkey is a NATO member country. Nothing can leave either. If they try to leave, we'll take them out. That's why they've locked themselves up in the bays of Novorossiysk. But we'll get them even there. There will be nothing left of the Black Sea Fleet but memories. That's a good phrase, damn it. It just came to my mind. Nothing but memories will remain of this much vaunted Black Sea Fleet. We are supposed to be in Sevastopol, because that's where our Black Sea Fleet is. We are supposed to be in Crimea, but where is it now? Where is this Black Sea Fleet that has become half submerged? Where is it? Sadly, it's locked up in the bays of Novorossiysk, where it's still being pounded and will be pounded until the very end. How all the Russian idiots have screwed themselves over. Now, regarding Moscow, I don't know what the situation with gasoline is there right now, but if Moscow ends up standing in gas lines, that will be a sign of our victory. If I see Muscovites standing in line for gasoline, I'll say just a little bit more.
Just a minute, I'm still waiting for that moment. When will that last drop come? What do we need to do to make it stop? Because today, while we're recording this stream with you friends, I'm constantly monitoring the news. Sorry, sometimes I look at Telegram. I'm just keeping an eye on things. Just now, Peskov said, we must win this war. We will continue it. So they still, despite everything, whether it's a paper tiger or a bear, it doesn't matter. Dasha?
There is no point in listening to Peskov, Medvedev, or Putin. All this is already meaningless. What difference does it make what they say? We must win. Hitler, too, sitting in the Reichskanzleitung bunker on April 30th, said that now the loyal units would arrive and we would win. Well?
Wonder waffles.
Wonder waffles, just waffles. Well? Then we shot him and buried his remains in the garden of the Reichskanzlei Kancellery. They also burned and were buried. By the way, Hitler's jaw lay in the safe of the chairman of the KGB SSR for a long time and was passed down by inheritance.
Sevens, can I even have a conversation with you? Can you just shoot some kind of mockbuster?
Yes, I'll tell you. That's an interesting fact. There were discussions for a long time, was it really Hitler or not, but they found his dentist and the jaw was proof that it was Hitler. It was brought to Moscow and kept in the safe of the chairman of the KGB of the USSR, among others. And Andropov's as well, among others.
Along with that, I think they mentioned in previous stories that some other men pretended to be Hitler, that he supposedly escaped somewhere, and they took photos as if it was Hitler.
When there is some kind of mystery, there are always a certain number of people who feed off it.
Well, yes.
And there are a certain number of journalist writers who, in order to inflate their own importance and popularity, exploit this topic. That's why rumors appear, but Hitler is really dead. Hitler is gone. He was already gone after, I think, the 30th of April.
Mitrik, well now, of course, to the topic I announced at the beginning. A British journalist has made a statement. Trump has learned a difficult lesson and is washing his hands of the war in Ukraine. That's how the chief American correspondent Rob Crilly reacted to the US president's high-profile post. He noted that instead of promising new support for Ukraine or stepping up actions against Russia, Trump is now essentially handing the situation over to Europe and NATO. No, there are no hints of additional support for Ukraine or that he will punish Moscow further. No punishment at all. His only commitment is to continue selling weapons to allies. That's it. And it's hardly a turning point. By staking his reputation to bring Putin to Alaska for negotiations and putting himself at the center of the talks, Trump learned a hard lesson. Ending a war is difficult, and it seems he's had enough. Crilly wrote, that's where we started with you today.
Dasha, I want to say once again that Trump really did put his reputation on the line. By inviting this international war criminal to Alaska, Trump genuinely wanted to reach an agreement with him. And by inviting him, he understood that he would come under a barrage of devastating criticism. How could he do that? You're shaking his hand, you're applauding him. This bastard came to America, but also pay attention to a few important details. First, they rolled out a wide carpet for Trump, for Putin a narrow one. Second, Putin was greeted at the airport in Alaska by powerful American planes flying overhead. As a reminder, watch yourself, know who's who. Don't forget. And what kind of planes greeted Putin in Alaska? They were just standing there, just standing. Such an insignificant detail. Let's not forget about Putin. He left Alaska empty-handed. Trump didn't see him off. They said goodbye in the hallway. This is a public humiliation. There was no dinner at all. Moreover, Putin laid flowers at the graves of Soviet soldiers in Alaska alone, even though, in theory, they were supposed to do it together. So yes, you could say this was a humiliation for Putin. They didn't achieve anything. But Trump wanted to achieve a result. Trump couldn't achieve a result. Trump put his name, I repeat, under the fire of criticism. And people will remind Trump of this for a long time. That's why Trump can't just wash his hands of it a priori. He can't walk away from resolving this conflict, this terrible war, because then they'll say to him, you're weak. You made statements. You made promises. You extended invitations. And all of this ended up amounting to nothing. There is constant political struggle in America. Trump can't risk not only his reputation, let's not even mention his own future, but also the future of the Republican Party. The Republican hawks won't let him do that. That's why he won't leave the game. He will continue to fight for Ukraine. I'm absolutely sure of that. Absolutely.
Dmitry, no empty promises, no forgiveness for the singer, exactly as you said. Returning to the important statements which I want to articulate with you, Rubio. Rubio has always been considered more of a hawk in Trump's team, someone who supports Ukraine, Kella, Rubio. But of course, he also has a pro-Russian streak just like Trump, so his position is complicated. Here, Rubio comes out with comments of the following nature. We can't impose sanctions on Russia because then the US would stop being a mediator in this war, Rubio said. Next, Sikorsky and then Keith Kellogg, respectively, made statements saying that Russians shouldn't complain if their planes are shot down over the territory of these countries. Sikorsky made this statement. Petr Pavel, the president of the Czech Republic, also articulated this, and Keith Kellogg also said that our allies are doing great. That's exactly how it should be. Because Rubio came out and said, no, this isn't about shooting down planes. What are you talking about? Only if these planes attack, if strikes begin, then we'll shoot them down. Otherwise, let them fly through. What is this even?
You see, Trump wants to achieve results. Trump is playing a complex game. These are parts of a bigger game to force Putin to make peace. If you're in a negotiation process, whether it's business, politics, or anything else, you can't act rashly because that would end the negotiations. You have to maneuver, to play the game. Always keeping in mind that you have a goal You have to move toward your goal. That's why the Americans are playing this game, to achieve results.
The only question now is that once again, Hungarian Prime Minister Orbán has said that he will in no way stop importing energy resources from Russia. Because again, Trump, we are ready to impose sanctions on Russia only if our partners in Europe stop buying energy resources from Russia. And we perfectly understand that this will never happen at all. All the more so since we have Hungary, Slovakia, that's clear, and not only them.
Slovakia is no longer in. Slovakia is ready to stop buying energy resources from Russia. Only Orbán remains. Orbán will come to his senses. Everything will be fine.
So, Dimitri, when I was on air with economic experts, we identified 5 countries that are still buying Russian energy resources today. Let's even more.
I think it's 7.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. It is indeed 7. Let us now carefully count them. We have France, then Spain, followed by Portugal. Next is Belgium, then Greece, subsequently Serbia. After that, Slovakia, and finally Hungary. So we've even counted...
Serbia is not an EU country.
Yes, of course. Well, it's a European country, that's clear.
Yes.
So 7 or 8 countries, accordingly, are currently buying energy resources from Russia. And here's the question, how do we deal with these 7 countries?
Well, this is where the Americans will come to the rescue. Besides, look, Trump's policy is based on something specific. He's constantly lowering global oil prices, right? Now they're going to resolve the issue with Maduro. Venezuela is the largest oil producer and supplier. They're about to let Venezuelan oil onto the market. Will it be fun? I'm actually calm about the future. I believe that everything will be fine.
Mitrik, when you say that everything will be fine, the question is...
When?
Yes, when? Because look, again, when we communicate with our audience, everyone writes that the war will go on for a very long time until Putin dies. So that means we will...
Erdogan also talks about a rather long war, I should certainly note.
That's very important, yes.
It is important. Yes, Erdogan understands a thing or two. They're putting it mildly.
He spoke mildly, yes. Yes.
And Erdogan talks about this, as do a whole range of analysts, meaning people deeply involved in the subject. I want to say that no one in the world, not a single person, knows how long the war will last. Just as no one knew when the Soviet Union would collapse, or even if it would collapse at all. And who could have said that the Soviet Union would collapse in 1991? No one.
That's true.
Events happen according to the will of fate. How will it all turn out? It will all happen.
Another thing is to understand that our audience, they need to understand how much we always had this illusion, especially when Trump came to power, that the war would end soon, that the war would end and society lived in this state. But there was an absolute president, Zelensky articulates this, and so on.
Trump created this illusion with his words, saying that he would end this war in 24 hours. He himself said this, and then he said a lot of other things as well. It doesn't come true. Listen, I was almost 100% certain that the hot phase of the war would end on December 30th of last year. I'm not denying what I said. I did say it. No, don't deny it. And let me remind you, Keith Kellogg on December 17th of last year said in an interview with Fox Business Channel, "We have every reason to end the hot phase of the war by the end of this year, December 17th. Well, I knew something, and Keith Kellogg all the more so. And it all went down the drain, so after that I stopped making any predictions at all. Well, I got into trouble over that prediction. I call things by their proper names. I'm not shy about doing that. I stand by what I said. And I know why I said it. And Keith Kellogg knows why he said it too. All for nothing. So no more predictions, guys. And I always tell our respected viewers, whoever makes any predictions, don't believe any of it. Don't believe anything. Because the situation often develops contrary, even to what we know. We know it should be a certain way. And suddenly, at the last moment, something works completely differently, and everything falls apart. What kind of predictions can there be? It's a deception.
Let me wrap up our conversation today. I'll ask one last question for today. President Zelensky articulated the following. We either need to end the war or 120 billion euros. Please.
Understood. Understood, said President Zelensky. We need 120 billion euros for our needs. In order to cover these needs, this concerns both filling the domestic budget and military procurements and so on. I am convinced that we will be given this money. Convinced. I don't even have any doubts about it. No one will stop. No.
Friends, our Wednesday broadcasts are always optimistic. Because Dmitrievich is always the optimist in our tandem. That's right. Give this video a like. Write a few of these questions in the comments in support of Ukraine, Ukraine's armed forces, and our tandem. Subscribe to all the YouTube channels of the Dmitry Gordon Empire and Leshya Basma. Subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. Even a happy one. And of course, Dmitrievich, some warm words to close out the show. You always say this.
Warm words to close. Despite the cold days, it will still be warm. But for the Russians, it will be cold. And they won't have gasoline or many other things. And they will be forced to end this war. They will be forced by circumstances, primarily economic ones. And everything will be fine for us, because we are fighting a just war, which will end with a just peace. And
the hero's word, superhero's word.